Hello and welcome to Just a Damn Nerd. Thanks for clicking on the video. Now, if you haven't already, please subscribe. You guys already know how much it helps. And today, we're talking about what happened to Jimbo Fisher.
The greatest thing in life you guys got to understand, you control the outcomes of everything that happens to you.
Outside the limit, to the 30, to the 30, 25, to the 20, to the 10, to the 5, touchdown!
It's the barriers you're breaking. It's the legacy you're leaving.
It's Rodgers! The Aggies win the game of the year in the Southeastern Conference.
The man who can keep passion, emotion, heart, and everything he's got, to keep his wits about him and be able to think and function, is the man who wins.
Winston rolling right, goes to pass on the other. It's caught! It's caught! It's caught! Touchdown FSU! Take the lead with 13 seconds remaining. Game over. Noles are the champions of college football. FSU 34, Auburn 31. Noles third championship.
So imagine this, guys. Whatever your dream job is, it doesn't matter. Just imagine your dream job. Imagine after years of hard work, you actually get that dream job. You go to one of the best institutions in that field. You succeed at the highest level in your chosen field. You are successful, well-liked, and considered to be one of the very best. Everything is coming up with your number, and everything seems great. Then, everything changes. You start falling apart. The people who were supporting you stop supporting you. The institution that has supported you for so long no longer wants you around. The collapse of your career and the institution you've been working for is set, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. This is the story of what happened to Jimbo Fisher. This is the story of how a man went from being one of the best coaches in college football to an afterthought and a joke, to a guy who would have been fired this year at A&M had his buyout not been $100 million. So, when we look at this moment here, 2015, the Rose Bowl, the national semifinal, an undefeated defending national champion Florida State goes to play Oregon. And in this moment, everything for Jimbo was gonna change. After this moment, everything would go downhill. Everything would continue to go downhill following this moment. Every year after this, Jimbo would perform a little worse, until eventually he'd be run out of town in Tallahassee. But we have to go back to the beginning to understand how the end came about. And for Jimbo Fisher, his beginning of his time as a Power 5 coach was at LSU. Jimbo Fisher was hired from Cincinnati to LSU in the 2000-2001 season, where he would systematically help build LSU's offense into a powerhouse. The Tigers head coach Nick Saban had a lot of faith in Jimbo, and for the most part, it seems like Jimbo's time at LSU was largely positive. This is long before the Jimbo of today. LSU's offense would improve year over year under Jimbo Fisher, as Jimbo Fisher would also gain a national championship in the 2002-2003 season when the Tigers upset the undefeated Oklahoma Sooners in the national title game. But even more impressive, Jimbo's offense in his second to last year at LSU averaged 32 points a game in the SEC. This had made Jimbo the hottest coaching commodity in all of college football. Everybody believed that Jimbo Fisher was going to be the next great head coach. Nick Saban around this time would also abandon ship to head to the National Football League to become the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And a whole bunch of Power 5 teams were courting Jimbo, but Jimbo's decision came down to two. First up was Texas. Texas's legendary head coach, Mack Brown, had made it clear that he was considering hanging up the whistle soon. Texas didn't really want to force Mack Brown out, but he had made it clear that he was going to be done soon, that he was just over the grind of coaching. So Texas was the first team to really catch Jimbo's attention. However, there was another competitor, another great program with years of success, whose aging head coach had started to fail. Florida State. Florida State, legendary, super god-tier head coach, had started to fall off in previous years. Following the 2000 national championship, Florida State would return to the title game in 2001, but every year after that, the Noles would lose additional games, going from 9-3 to 8-4 to 7-6, and a second 7-6 season would also follow that. So Florida State was also looking to pick up Jimbo Fisher. The idea was to make Jimbo Fisher the coach in waiting in Tallahassee, as he would wait until Bobby Bowden would retire. This seemed like a great decision for the Seminoles, and Bobby Bowden himself was pushing for Jimbo Fisher to be his successor. After some negotiating, Jimbo Fisher elected to go to Florida State. And at first, this would seem like the right decision. Florida State would actually rebound Jimbo's first year, going 9-4. However, the next 2 seasons, Florida State would return to 6-6. But Jimbo was helping Bobby bring in top classes again, something Bobby had been struggling to do in recent years. Bobby Bowden would say in an interview that he found it difficult to talk to modern kids. He didn't know what to say to them when he was sitting on the couch with them. This was most likely because Bobby was 80 years old. The much younger Jimbo Fisher was able to connect much more with children, and even today, Jimbo is one of the best recruiters in the entire sport. He seems to have an ability to convince these kids to come play for him. However, what Jimbo would do next would actually turn off many Seminole fans to him. Bobby Bowden decided he wanted to play one more season and publicly would announce this following a 7-6 finish. Bobby wasn't okay with going out with a 7-6 finish, and with quarterback Christian Ponder coming in, it's likely that the next year Florida State would most likely win 9 or 10 games again. So Bobby wanted one more year, or so he claimed. However, this was a dangerous time for the Seminoles because many teams were attempting to poach Jimbo as their head coach, including Texas, who had come back around in an attempt to poach him to become the next head coach. A lot of people forget, too, that Clemson wasn't entirely sold on Dabo Swinney and was at least considering looking for a head coach before deciding to keep him. Great decision for the Tigers. So Jimbo Fisher would go up to the office and essentially tell the athletic director and president of the university, it's him or me. Basically, Jimbo said if he can't become the head coach now, then he's going to consider one of these other jobs. Jimbo considering other jobs, yeah, that's different. Florida State would make the decision to encourage Bobby Bowden to retire, basically force Bobby Bowden to retire. This led to a lot of legendary Florida State players who were now in the NFL taking shots at Jimbo and turned at least half of the fan base off Jimbo Fisher from the get-go. The Florida State fan base had become split overnight. The fans who hated Jimbo Fisher and the ones who were hoping he would do good. So Jimbo Fisher had an uphill battle. He had to re-win the Florida State fan base back because of his impatience. Now, I will say one thing here in Jimbo's defense. It's likely Bobby Bowden would not have retired had Florida State won 10 games the next season. It's most likely Bobby would have stayed around for a few more years, and without Jimbo helping him recruit, Florida State most likely would have relapsed to its 6-6 ways, because I don't think Jimbo would have stayed on the staff had he not become the head coach. In any case, in the 2009-2010 season, Jimbo Fisher officially became the head coach of Florida State, and it paid instant dividends. Florida State would be embarrassed by Oklahoma in Week 4, 43-3, but for the most part, the team showed fight for the first time in years, heading to the Chick-fil-A Bowl against South Carolina. 4-8 Florida State would battle 10-2 South Carolina in a game where the Noles were supposed to lose. But thanks to Jimbo's ability to motivate his team at this time, Florida State was able to pull off a big upset. This would give Jimbo quite a bit of capital, and Florida State would actually begin improving. The next year, Florida State would hit 9-3 in the regular season and win 10 overall games. The year following that, Florida State would go 12-2. So Jimbo was rebuilding the team and at this point had regained the majority of the fan base. But it was obvious the 2013-2014 team was different. From the first time Jameis Winston threw a pass, it was clear that Florida State was a different animal with him as quarterback. Winston's incredible performance in Week 3 against the third-ranked Clemson Tigers when he gave this legendary speech.
Put a smile on your face, okay? Because Florida State, if we gonna do it then, we do it big then. Let's go, baby.
Would lead Florida State to being the #1 team in the nation from Week 3 all the way through. As a matter of fact, Florida State would stay #1 till well into the season following this one. The Noles would absolutely annihilate #3 Clemson 53-13, and Jimbo Fisher was the made man at this point. Florida State would continue in the 2013-2014 season, ruling everyone. There was not a close game until the BCS national title game, where Florida State was a little deer in the headlights from the first half, going in down 21-3. And what would become the mark of Jimbo's career, however, Florida State rallied in the second half to win the national championship. At this point, Jimbo is on top of the world. This is Jimbo's peak at Florida State. This is Jimbo's peak in his career because he hasn't shown any signs of being able to regain this level of success. Jimbo Fisher had taken a team that was averaging 6 wins and built them into a national champion in only 4 years. Everyone thought Florida State was the next Alabama, that this team was going to be a national championship competitor for the next 10 or 20 years. Florida State slammed a massive contract extension on the table for Jimbo Fisher. 7 years, I think it was 7 years, $6.5 million, and everybody seemed happy. However, at this point in our story, along came a spider. In 2013, Florida State hired Doopy Stan Wilcox, the worst athletic director in Florida State history. If you told me Stan Wilcox was a lifelong Gator fan, I wouldn't argue. Stan Wilcox went about his task of destroying the Florida State football program, and he did it almost completely. And if you want to know more about Stan Wilcox, don't worry, because Doopy Stan will get his own video next time. However, at this point, even Stan Wilcox didn't seem to be a problem, as Jimbo Fisher was on cloud 9. Florida State would start the 2014-2015 season ranked number 1, with the smart money favorite being that Florida State would repeat as the BCS national champion, as they had brought back the majority of the team, including star quarterback and Heisman Trophy winner Jameis Winston.
It was just, it happened. But then when I went up there, I was like, I'm speechless. I don't have anything to say.
But it was at this point that the cracks were becoming very public. Thanks to Stan Wilcox not being a good athletic director and intentionally going after Jimbo Fisher, points on making his own video soon, Florida State's dirty laundry found itself being aired an awful lot after Stan Wilcox was hired. I mean, every major college football power has tons of dirty laundry, but for the most part, it's hidden behind closed doors, and you have to actually look really hard to find it. Like, I bet you didn't know Alabama had 5 players arrested this year. I didn't know that until I looked into it. But you see, most of these big institutions do a good job of hiding their dirty laundry. My theory is that Stan Wilcox wasn't even trying, and then Stan Wilcox would take his useless ass on TV and announce that Jimbo Fisher was going to LSU. Now, this would have been a ridiculous announcement if it was true. This announcement should not have come out until the season was over, but it was not even true, which means that this announcement was complete horse shit, which means Stan Wilcox just announced it because I believe personally Stan Wilcox was trying his best to turn the Florida State fan base against Jimbo Fisher. Other problems following that national championship season that had creeped into the public eye was Jeremy Pruitt, Florida State's defensive coordinator, who had helped Florida State's defense be one of the best of all time, left. Much to the surprise of Jimbo Fisher, as Kirk Herbstreit would mention, Jimbo Fisher would speak to Kirk Herbstreit, telling Kirk Herbstreit that he was shocked at Jeremy Pruitt's departure. Pruitt would say in later interviews that he just couldn't work with Jimbo anymore. He would go become the defensive coordinator of Alabama, I believe, if memory serves, but would later become the head coach of Tennessee, a job he would fail at. However, all the off-the-season problems, the arrest, the Wilcoxes, the Jeremy Pruitts didn't seem to damper Florida State too much. This was the most talented team in the country. With a future first overall pick at quarterback, everything still seemed to be coming up Seminole. As the season got started, it was pretty obvious this Florida State team wasn't the same as the one a year ago. The defense was piss poor. The offense seemed to only play when they were losing. However, the talent carried the day as Florida State would come back against teams like Notre Dame, Florida, and even Miami. But the one where it was clear they had gone too far was Louisville, letting Louisville go up 28-0. But the Noles managed to rally and come back over all these teams, led by quarterback Jameis Winston's 50-touchdown performance and freshman running back Dalvin Cook. The Noles were able to rally. Also, with the excellent play of freshman cornerback Jalen Ramsey, Florida State was able to force turnovers, including one in the last second against Miami, to hold on to the comeback. Florida State's lazy, piss-poor effort was a problem for most of the season. Jimbo Fisher would even yell and cuss, scream, and smash stuff in the locker room. After the South Florida game against, hilariously, Willie Taggart, Fisher was clearly frustrated by the lack of effort his team was giving. He could not seem to motivate them to actually play up to the level. One of the big issues was that the discipline had fallen by the wayside following the national championship season. In a later interview, Jimbo would admit that his team had got lazy, himself included, because of how easy everything was. For those 2 seasons, Florida State had only really been challenged in one game. Well, the scores don't seem to indicate that because a lot of the games in the second season were close. Florida State would spot their opponents 20-25 points before beating them by 20. It was obvious that this Florida State team only showed up when they were challenged. Jimbo Fisher would basically tell the team prior to this Rose Bowl game that if they didn't take this team seriously, they'd get their doors blown off. Now, as Florida State approached this moment, the moment of destruction for Jimbo's career, there were a couple other things to remember. This game was pretty close going into halftime. It was only a one-score game, but on a possession right before this one, Florida State running back Dalvin Cook had fumbled it, giving Oregon a quick score. However, there was another issue at play. There are two reports about this, so I'm not sure which one is accurate. Jimbo Fisher was allegedly called at halftime of this game by his wife, who told him she was leaving him for a former Florida Gator personal trainer. Now, whether he was told at halftime or told before the game doesn't really matter. Either way, his wife was attempting to affect the outcome of this game, and it's clear Jimbo's head and heart weren't really in it. However, everything was still competitive until this point. Jameis Winston would forget how to throw a football, and this would turn into a touchdown for Oregon. This moment was really the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the fall for Coach Fisher. However, it wouldn't be a cliff. It was more like a gradual decline. Florida State would go on to lose this playoff game by, at the time, a playoff record of 52-20. However, if you watched the national championship game last night, you realize that 52-20 is nowhere near the worst playoff performance ever. TCU should be ashamed of them themselves. Florida State would be in a bit of a bind in the successive seasons because of a lack of quarterback. The season after Jameis Winston went pro, Florida State really didn't have a quarterback. I can't even remember the name of the starting quarterback that year. Jimbo would lean heavily on Dalvin Cook, who would still carry the Noles to a 9-win season and a berth in the New Year's Six game. The next year seemed like the big turnaround season as freshman quarterback DeAndre Francois would start. The Noles would battle again to a 9-3 season, but a victory over a very good Michigan team in the Orange Bowl put Florida State back on the map. However, as mentioned in my Death of Florida State video and how Mike Novell resurrected it, this next game was the destruction of Jimbo's time at Florida State and, of course, the downfall of his career. But before we get into that, let's talk about Jimbo's first 5 seasons. Jimbo Fisher, through his first 5 seasons as head coach, was the very best head coach in college football. He had an incredible 58-11 record, had won 3 ACC titles, had won 3 New Year's Six bowl games, had won a national championship, and played in the playoffs. His average win percentage over this time was 11.6 games. There were only 12 games in the season, so Jimbo Fisher was incredible. It is maybe the best 5-year stretch of any coach. However, there were some signs of Jimbo's struggles at this time. For example, Florida State only one time. Actually, in Jimbo's entire career, he has only finished one time higher in the AP rankings than he started the season. Most of the time, he finishes substantially lower. But either way, the first 5 years of Jimbo Fisher were fantastic. Unfortunately for Florida State and A&M fans, the previous 8 are what we're now talking about. So on this play, which you have seen before probably 100 times, DeAndre Francois gets injured. Now, Doopy, stupid-ass Stan Wilcox was waiting for something like this to happen. This was Stan Wilcox's wet dream. This allowed Wilcox to finally force Jimbo Fisher out the door, as Florida State, without DeAndre Francois, would completely collapse, falling to 5-6 when Jimbo Fisher was shoved out the door to Texas A&M. At this point in Jimbo's life and career, he had a personal life problem. His wife had left him, and they were in a legal battle for, well, the money and kids. Jimbo would win both legal battles, but there's still a distracting thing going on. And then on top of that, Jimbo Fisher, trying to struggle as a single father, now was being pressured by his boss, because even though we don't really think about it, athletic directors are the boss of the head coaches. So Jimbo's frustration sent him to President Thrasher's office. He said, "Wilcox, or I'm leaving." What shocked Jimbo is that Thrasher chose Wilcox. It shocked me too at the time. Jimbo had been successful at Florida State. Barring one injury to a star quarterback who would be back the next season, it didn't seem like a good decision to move on from Jimbo Fisher. And to be fair, it wasn't to start with. Check out my Death of a Program video on Florida State. It covers a lot of what happened after Jimbo left in Tallahassee, because in this video we're moving on to A&M now. So Jimbo Fisher would accept a 10-year, $7 million a year contract, which Wilcox would hilariously say, we just couldn't manage to pay that. However, Florida State just signed Mike Novell to a 7-year, $7 million a year contract. So I'm pretty sure Florida State could have actually paid that. They did not want to. There was a lot of frustration as Jimbo would take many shots at Florida State. It was clear he was angry the Noles pushed him out. But Jimbo is not an idiot. I think he knew on some level that the recruiting base in Florida had helped him build a winner, and it was going to be a lot more difficult at Texas A&M. Plus, somehow, Texas A&M standards were somehow higher than Florida State's, even though A&M hasn't won a national championship in any of our lifetimes, and the Noles have been one of the most dominant teams in the previous 60 years. So it didn't make a lot of sense, but either way, this A&M team thought hiring Jimbo meant they had already won a national championship, as they would cringely produce him a national championship trophy, his first interview, with no date on it. What were they thinking? In any case, Jimbo Fisher would immediately disappoint the A&M fans. Many of the A&M fans liked Kevin Summerlin. He had been a fairly successful coach. Kevin Summerlin's first 5 years at A&M saw the coach going 42-16. Not bad, really. But A&M believed that Jimbo could take that 42-16 to 58-11. Unfortunately for A&M fans and the university, it seems more and more like, even to current day, that A&M paid $100 million to save Florida State from having to pay a $40 million buyout to Jimbo Fisher. It actually seems like A&M may have done Florida State a great service. Jimbo Fisher's first year at A&M was at best mediocre, going 9-4. Now, 9-4 isn't the end of the world, but A&M wasn't paying Jimbo Fisher to win 9 games. Kevin Summerlin was winning 9 games. They were paying Jimbo Fisher to win a national championship. His excessive season was even worse, as A&M would go 8-5. At this point, there were a lot of Aggie fans who were already over Jimbo Fisher. They were frustrated and angry that they had paid this guy $100 million to be a worse coach than Kevin Summerlin. The next season was the COVID year, and if you ask me, it shouldn't count at all. They shouldn't even have played college football the COVID year, but either way, they did. Jimbo Fisher would go 9-1, as the SEC would only play itself over this era. Jimbo Fisher almost slid his way into the playoffs this season, and in just the most baffling move I have ever seen, A&M gave Jimbo a contract extension following a 9-1 COVID-racked season. The weirdest season in college football, a season where the Gators were 1 game away from playing in the playoffs, a team that hasn't been successful in years, pretty much since Urban Meyer left. So the COVID season really should not have counted. It probably shouldn't even have been played. It was different in the NFL. The NFL played a full season and just didn't have fans. In college, half of these teams really didn't even play games. I mean, Florida State only played half the season, and other teams didn't play at all, opting out of the whole season. Either way, the mess of the COVID season was Jimbo's one outlier. The 1 year where Jimbo Fisher supposedly did good, but if you look at Jimbo's career, he averages 9 wins anyway. It's likely he would have gone 9-4 that season had they actually played all the games, because that's kind of just what Jimbo does. Either way, Jimbo would get a contract extension, pushing his contract out until 2033, and the $7 million a year became $10 million a year, making Jimbo again the highest paid coach in college football. Which really doesn't make any sense, because Jimbo was never as good of a coach as Dabo Swinney or Nick Saban. So the fact he's paid like those guys, and don't even compare him to Kirby Smart. But the big part of that contract extension that will haunt A&M fans' dreams is it included a $94.6 million buyout, meaning that in the upcoming years, A&M fans are probably stuck with Jimbo Fisher for quite some time. Most likely another 2 or 3 years before A&M is willing to spend $50 million to buy him out, unless the A&M boosters are just going to eat $100 million. Well, it probably really depends on how A&M does next year. Either way, the season following the COVID year, the first full season, Jimbo Fisher would go 8-4 again, finishing 3rd in his side of the SEC, and again missing a New Year's Six game as he would head to the Gator Bowl for the 2nd year. At this point, In spite of the press trying to cover Jimbo's ass and talk about how A&M had a bright future because they signed a #1 class, football fans are smart, and I'm pretty sure the A&M fans were extremely frustrated. I mean, a #1 class doesn't make up for the fact that you're not fucking winning. All this money spent and seemed completely wasted. However, there was a #1 class, so coming into the 2022 season, A&M was ranked 6th, and the hope was actually there. Jimbo Fisher had brought in the best class in the country. It seemed like this was the year where A&M will finally get everything on track. However, the 2022-2023 season was the absolute worst season of Jimbo's career. It's true, his final season at Florida State, he went 5-6 before the Seminoles told him to get the fuck out of here. But that's because quarterback DeAndre Francois had started the season with a very severe injury. Jimbo was quarterbackless. There was no massive injury at A&M to derail the season. They just weren't good. And A&M fans will be given the reality check of the decade in only week 2, as Appalachian State, a team from the group of 5 that would not even make a bowl game, came into College Station and upset Texas A&M. This was one of the worst losses in the history of the Texas A&M program, and A&M fans were rightfully furious. Unfortunately for A&M fans, it didn't get any better, as a few weeks later, A&M would barely hold off a terrible Miami team that would also miss a bowl game before losing their way through the rest of the year. It's true that Jimbo Fisher would beat a highly ranked LSU to end the season, but to all you A&M fans watching this, let me tell you from a Seminole fan perspective who actually dealt with Jimbo for a long time, Jimbo will win you one of those games to make him seem important and necessary. But in reality, he'll go right back to being Jimbo next year. As a matter of fact, I'll predict right now, Texas A&M will win 8 games next year. 8 or 9, because that's about all Jimbo's ever going to get you. Maybe not, though, because the SEC is improving around him. With the improving of LSU, the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, the Gators seem to be up and coming. Tennessee seems to be up and coming. Georgia's the best team in college football. Alabama's still Alabama. And most likely in 2024 or 2025, Florida State and Clemson will join the ACC, meaning that it will give even less opportunity for Texas A&M to actually win. So Jimbo Fisher's time at A&M has been a complete and utter failure. Kevin Summerlin, through his first 5 seasons at A&M, was 42-16, while Jimbo Fisher, through his first 5 seasons at Texas A&M, is 39-21, meaning A&M is paying almost double to be a worse football team. Also, we were talking about a pattern of decline for Jimbo Fisher. In his first 5 seasons we mentioned, he went 58-11 and won a natty. In his 8 seasons following that, Jimbo Fisher is 64-33. He averages only 8 wins a season. He's only been to 2 New Year's Six games following that initial 5 seasons. And he's done all of that with top 5 recruiting classes. Nobody does less with more than Jimbo Fisher. The entirety of Jimbo's career seemed to diverge when his wife divorced him. It seems like Jimbo Fisher just wasn't the same man after that. And maybe it's because he has to spend a lot more time with the kids now that his wife is gone and he has custody. But Jimbo Fisher's success has become mediocre to below average. This is what A&M was paying for. They were paying for a guy who first 5 years was the best coach in the country. But Florida State, up close to Jimbo all of the time, had realized that the writing was on the wall. Jimbo was collapsing as a coach, couldn't keep assistants, couldn't get players to come back for extra seasons, and wasn't getting the most out of his talent. If you look at Florida State's recruiting classes over the time that Jimbo was there, you can pick out 1 or 2 players from each class, but each class had 5 or 6 5-stars. Where are all of the success these players should have had? The lack of ability to develop talent followed Jimbo to A&M, as his classes have been great, but you'd be hard-pressed to name any one of these A&M players on a national level. And his whoppingly pathetic 64-33 of an 8-year period does not encourage anyone to believe that Jimbo Fisher is on the up. Jimbo Fisher has actually been even worse in his 5 years at Texas A&M, averaging only 7.8 wins a season. Why, if you eliminate the season where DeAndre got injured, his final few years at Florida State, he was averaging 10 wins. Florida State is a more elite college football program than Texas A&M, but not by a whole lot. The A&M fans will right to hope that Jimbo Fisher may be able to put them up on that level with the Florida States of the world, with the USCs, with the Alabamas, with the Ohio States. Even teams like Miami, who haven't been good in years, still have that blue blood pedigree. There was a lot of reason to hope. However, a lot of us Seminole fans saw the writing on the wall. We knew that Florida State was declining rapidly. We knew that Florida State was in serious trouble. We knew Jimbo wasn't disciplining his players, that they were getting arrested off the field, and that the coach had seemed to have lost his touch. We saw the decline from the national championship season. This wasn't a guy who built a winner. This was a one-hit wonder. He had accomplished his lifelong goal of being the best head coach in the country, but it was only for a couple years. Jimbo Fisher was sent packing, and very soon will most likely be sent packing from Texas A&M, as he will be forced most likely to go to his hometown team of West Virginia, where he'll probably get a fortune to lose there as well. If you look at Jimbo in the last 8 years, he's an average to below average head coach. He's not likely to get you anything. He will beat one or two giant teams because A&M's talent is ridiculous. You don't have to motivate your kids to get up to play Alabama. They'll motivate it anyway. It's when you play Appalachian State at home, you have to motivate your kids to get up to play. And that's what Jimbo can't do anymore. He can't get the best out of his players. He could for his first 5 years at Florida State, but he can't and hasn't been able to for almost 8 years. The question I have for every A&M fan who's got it this far in this video, do you guys believe that the 8-year trend of worse every year is going to go away? Because if you don't, I really, really feel sorry for you. I don't believe it's going to go away. I believe Jimbo Fisher will continue to decline for the next couple of years, and I feel bad for the A&M faithful. They're stuck with Jimbo for another 3 or 4 years, and most likely they won't sniff the playoffs over that period. I could be wrong. Jimbo could manage to build A&M back into a winner, but with over 24 players declaring for the transfer portal and an additional 4 players going to the draft, it's pretty obvious that the players have lost faith in Coach Fisher's ability to get them to where they want to go. While the team that Jimbo Fisher decimated and tried to leave in the worst possible state has seemed to rise from the ashes, sure that one season doesn't bring Florida State back, and 10 wins isn't really good enough anyway in Tallahassee. But it shows great progress. It seems that Florida State is trending in the right direction, while A&M is trending in the wrong one. It seems that in spite of the fact Stan Wilcox's his combination of racism and personal issues with Jimbo Fisher that led to him forcing him out actually worked out better in the long run. However, no one would argue that the guy Stan Wilcox hired to replace Jimbo Fisher did anything but cause more damage. It's pretty damn clear that Jimbo Fisher is not the man he once was. He is no longer a top 5 coach, nor is he close. And when Jimbo Fisher looks back on his life and career, he will see nothing but missed opportunity. One incredible moment in the sun. 1 second where he was the best in the entire sport. But that 1 second is long gone. A&M fans are stuck, and Jimbo Fisher will destroy another program. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you made it this far in the video, hit that like button. Please subscribe. It means everything. We're up to 330 subscribers. I wanted to thank all of them. I know that the general idea is 300 subscribers is nothing to celebrate, but you know, every subscriber helps. I appreciate anyone who hits that subscribe button, even if you're not going to come back and watch more videos on the channel, or maybe you've seen everything and you're just going to wait till I make a new video. I release new videos every week. We do 1 video game video and then 1 football video game. So that's 2 video game videos a month and 2 football videos a month, at least for the foreseeable future. But either way, whether you enjoyed the video, whether you think I should just shut the fuck up, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you guys liked it. I hope you'll come back soon. And as always, this is the Damn Nerd signing out.